What is a deputy?
Anyone can be a deputy, including a family member, as long as you're over 18.
So how do you balance financial responsibility, which is your area, with compassion and understanding for what the family and or case manager or what the other parties may be wanting?
It's about taking a holistic approach, and it's understanding not just the client's needs, but the wider needs of the family.
So when should families start to think about appointing a deputy?
Take as much advice as you possibly can, because there is support out there.
As early as you can.
As early as you can, absolutely, yeah.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Medical Negligence Matters. With me today is Brian Bacon, who is a solicitor and head of the Court Protection team at Thomson Snell Passmore. Hi Brian, how are you?
Hi Tami, I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for coming today. I wanted to ask you some questions about what a deputy does. So can you tell me, for listeners who've never heard the term before, what is a deputy?
Okay, well at its most basics, I mean, the deputy is someone who is appointed by the Court of Protection to manage the decisions on behalf of someone who lacks capacity. That could be in relation to either property and financial affairs or in relation to health and welfare.
So what does lacking capacity mean?
It means that someone is unable to make a decision for themselves in relation to a specific matter. So you could lack capacity to make a decision in relation to one matter, but you may have capacity to make decisions in relation to something else. And the law is governed by an act of Parliament. It's called the Mental Capacity Act, which sets out the tests for if someone lacks capacity.
And I suppose there are different circumstances which might cause someone to lack capacity, but mainly you and I meet over people who have somehow been injured, and so will never really be able to look after their own affairs.
Yes, that's right. So, a lot of our kind of mutual clients will have had a traumatic brain injury or acquired brain injury or a birth injury. So, yeah.
So how did you get into this work and what motivated you to stay in this area of the law?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate. I didn't start out doing this area of work. I did more general, what we would call private client work, doing probate and administration of estates and some wills. And at the time, my then boss started getting into doing a little bit more work relating to people who lack capacity. They weren't called deputies back then. And asked if I wanted to be part of the growth of that area of work in the firm at the time. I have a older brother who suffers from Down syndrome, and there was a personal connection there for me as well. And that was part of the motivation. I found it very interesting, both from a professional but also a personal,
it gives
personal
you
level.
Perspective, your client's perspective as well.
Yes.
So you bring that to it as well.
Yeah.
So what kinds of situations can lead someone to need a court deputy?
Generally, a court deputy would only be needed when someone who lacks capacity hasn't made a lasting power of attorney themselves. Obviously, if someone, such as some of the clients that we've worked together on, who's a child, they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that. And if they then have an estate or some monies that need managing on their behalf, they would then need a deputy. But equally, an adult who may have acquired a brain injury much later in life through a road traffic accident or other form of medical negligence, they may not have made a lasting power of attorney and so would need a deputy. But there are also circumstances where even if someone has made an LPA, it might be more beneficial for them to have a deputy anyway. So there needs to be an estate. There needs to be some money,
something there for you
to be appointed. It needs to be proportionate. If someone only receives benefits and has minimal amount of money, the court would be cautious about appointing a deputy. Certainly, be very cautious about appointing a professional deputy where there are charges that would be incurred.
And I suppose that's why we come to you at the time when we're going to settle or claim, or some money is going to come to the person. They may well have been claiming benefits up until that point. And I think sometimes parents, because it's often the parents, will wonder why, as they've been able to administer everything so far, they're now being advised that actually a professional deputy might be the best thing to have for them. And how would you answer that question?
Anyone can be a deputy, including a family member, as long as you're over 18. But the Court of Protection, in these kinds of circumstances, when there is a large damages award, prefer there to be a professional appointed, someone who's independent and can take an objective and a constructive approach together with the family to manage those monies on their behalf. Sometimes
families are worried because they think, obviously, you're going to charge fees and this is going to come out of the award of compensation that their loved one receives. But of course, your fees are always added to that, aren't they? So if they choose not to go with a professional deputy at the time the case is resolved, they're never going to be able to obtain that money at a later date. So it's important for them to make that decision before a case is resolved, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Tami. And actually, we've been involved in cases in the past, thankfully they're few and far between, where a case has settled some time ago and then the family realised that actually managing those funds can be very difficult, and not just in terms of the practical aspects, but also in terms of the relational aspects between them and their relatives, because it puts them in conflict. And so they've then come to us and said, would you act? And that's fine, we can, but of course the money is less than it would otherwise have been.
And of course parents will get older, and sometimes they worry that they won't be there. They'll be leaving a child, and then who can they trust to look after their funds at that stage?
That's right.
What would you say is a typical day in the life of a deputy, or week, maybe a day or a week in the life of a deputy?
Yeah, well, it's an old cliche, isn't it? There's no one typical day, but I mean, it can involve all sorts of things. I meet regularly with clients and their families to discuss specific decisions that might be relevant and appropriate at that particular...
Because it's an ongoing relationship, you and the family, once you're the deputy.
Yes, once you're the deputy, I mean, nothing's ever set in stone, and a deputy can be changed, but we're very fortunate with this kind of work that actually we have that long-term relationship with the clients and with their families, and I think our most long-standing client we've been appointed for over 30 years. So it's a very rewarding relationship that you have.
And you're constantly in touch with them about various decisions. So what sorts of decisions are you as a deputy responsible for making for the family or with the family?
So a whole range, and they can be very almost mundane types of decisions day to day about paying invoices, paying bills that come through that require settling, to much more major decisions such as purchasing a property or considering with the family and the client about having building works or extension adaptation works done to the home, to decisions around investing for the long-term future of the client. So a whole raft of things will be there for us to decide. So that will be a typical thing that we would deal with. I have regular contact with a lot of the other professionals that we work with on our cases, so such as yourself, solicitors when the claims are ongoing, the case manager. The relationship between us, the case manager, and the family is a really vital one. They're there on the ground. They understand a lot more of some of the practical and clinical needs, and often the family will approach the case manager first because they're there, and then the case manager will often come to us and talk about decisions as well as the family coming to us. So that's a really important relationship.
There must be times when not everybody agrees on the way forward about different things. So how do you balance financial responsibility, which is your area, with compassion and understanding for what the family and or case manager or what the other parties may be wanting?
And that can be a really tricky thing, and it's a really good question. I tend to see the two as intertwined. I think they're kind of part of the same DNA of the role that we do. I think it's part and parcel of financial decision making in the area of work that we do, working with vulnerable clients who have been injured in some way and suffered a traumatic brain injury. Compassion is part and parcel and it's got to be central to the decision making. That doesn't mean that we have to say yes to everything. No. And certainly that's not the way that you should be approaching the work as a deputy or decisions. But very much it's about taking a holistic approach, and it's understanding not just the client's needs, but the wider needs of the family and the long-term goals, because that's vitally important. The well-being situation that the family is in is as important to the client as specific decisions for them and their day-to-day.
You're that far removed from the family. You understand, you have compassion, but you're not right in the thick of it. So it is your role to be able to be a bit more clinical and stand back a little bit.
Yeah, to take that objective view. And that's one of the reasons why the court do prefer there to be someone like a professional to be able to take that slightly more independent, objective role and to make hard decisions when they come along without worrying about that risk of conflict, because it does exist. Yeah.
So what would you say is the most rewarding part of your job? What do you enjoy or what makes you smile?
I love working with people. So what makes me smile is seeing clients who are able to show me and the people around them something that they've done. And it might be really, really small, but you can see the impact of, and it might not be a big sum of money, but you may have spent some money on support through some form of a service support, some form of therapeutic support, or maybe a piece of kit and equipment. And it might not be a big thing, but it makes a huge difference to the day-to-day for either them or their family.
It brings a smile.
It just brings a smile. Yeah. So I love seeing that. And a similar thing with families, the whole idea between getting compensation and having a professional support team around you is to relieve the family from those, as far as possible, from those day-to-day burdens that they face in living with and supporting their relative who's suffered this huge life change, and being able to support them in that and seeing differences to their lives. And again, it might not be huge, but just small things that can alleviate the pressures on them is really rewarding. Yeah.
So on the other side, what's the most challenging part, either emotionally or practically, of your job?
Yeah, I think it's the point that you alluded to slightly earlier, Tami. It's where you've got to say no for whatever reason it might be, and there may be really good reasons about that, but that can be very practically challenging and relationally challenging with the family, because you need to help them understand why, the reasoning behind the decision. And I think that's an approach that is really important as a professional deputy, to be able to explain reasoning behind why a decision that's being made in someone's best interests is being made in that way, whether that's a positive or a negative.
Especially if it's not the outcome that they were hoping for when they first came to you.
That's right.
Are you able to share with us a story that really stays with you and explains why your role as a deputy is so important?
I think so many of the clients that we work with are really vulnerable. Some of them are very lucky to have amazingly supportive families and relatives around them and professionals, and some of them don't have that kind of support. There's a couple of clients that I've worked with in the past where very sadly they haven't had that support and have been taken advantage of and by other people. There's one particular lady that I worked for many years ago. She's passed away now, who was elderly and suffered from dementia, and someone many years younger than her had befriended her. She was a very wealthy lady and had started taking advantage of her, cutting her off from friends and family and starting to access her bank accounts. And we got involved at the point where authorities had become alerted to this, and we came in to actually preserve and protect her accounts and to hold the person that had been abusing her financially to account for the things
you were able
that
to do
he'd
both
done.
of those things.
Yeah, we were able to work with authorities, both the local authority and the police, to be able to kind of bring that together. And yeah, that was as difficult as that was. It felt like you were actually there for a reason and really making a difference.
I can understand that.
And similarly with one of our brain injured clients, one of our clients, he liked talking about his damages award to people, and people took advantage of that. And so being able to work with case manager and professionals in that to put in place protections for him to be able to manage those situations as they
that are going to occur because of his own difficulties. Have you ever seen the difference that good financial management has made to someone's quality of life?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really key thing for us to think ahead, and it's about drawing that balance between enabling someone to enjoy their life to the full as it is now, and balancing that with making sure that there's sufficient funds for their future as well. One of the a former senior judge of the Court of Protection once said that if you can spend the last penny of a client's money on the last day of their lives, then you've kind of done your job. Now that's an ideal that none of us can kind of be held to.
I can see that.
But that is the ideal. It's no good for someone to be able to eke out their funds and die in many decades time with huge sums of money in a bank account if they've been scrimping and saving all along. And good financial management is there to try and balance the use of the monies now and making sure that it's preserved for the future. That
sounds like a tricky balance.
It is a tricky balance, but if you can get it right, then it's
So when should families start to think about appointing a deputy?
Usually, in the context of a clinical negligence claim, it would be as soon as liability has been admitted by the defendant. At that point, that's the time when usually a deputy should start coming on board.
Because they're going to get some money more than benefits at that stage.
At that stage, that's right. Yeah. So that's generally the time that it should be thought about.
Yeah, because we often at that time, that's when they first begin to have professional carers, the additional therapies, and look at moving. Yeah. And I suppose it's better if you're involved right from the beginning rather than presented with packages and things that have already been agreed.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes, there are things in place and that's great. And but yes, if you can become involved right from those early stages, then it helps that relationship both ways for us to understand, the goals and the aims and what the priorities are going forward, and for them to understand the role of the deputy and to get used to that, because we're not ignorant to the fact that it's a strange thing for a family to have have someone they've never met before kind of parachuted in to help manage a relative's money. So that does take time to get used to.
Finally, what advice would you give to someone who's suddenly thrust into caring for a vulnerable loved one?
That's a good question. I think I would say to them, get as much help and input as you can. There are sadly so many people, so many families that have gone through these experiences, and it's a very traumatic time. But we're really lucky that there are organisations, there are charities, there are professional services out there to help families who are going through a trauma, really, where a relative has suffered a brain injury. And I think take as much advice as you possibly can, because there is support out there.
As early as you can.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, that's fabulous. I think that's going to have been really helpful for a lot of our clients. So thank you very much, Brian.
It's a pleasure, Tami. Thank you very much for having me.